Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Coffee Chat with Matt. I am your host, Matt Serby, and I'm here at Wasco Nursery. And the summer is upon us, and there's nothing more summery than hibiscus. So I have brought up a variety of hibiscus today, and we're going to talk all things hibiscus this morning. So we are here in Northern Illinois, Zone 5, and a lot of people equate hibiscus with tropical locales. And while there certainly are some tropical hibiscus that we will grow and sell here that will have to be brought in for the winter, like this beautiful Aaron Rachel hibiscus right here in front of me. Mostly what I wanted to do was focus on the dinner plate or perennial hibiscus, as well as the other hibiscus, which we call Rose of Sharon. So we'll just mention briefly the tropical hibiscus because they are a lot of fun. And a lot of people like to keep these on the patio for the summertime. They're great on your deck, patio, porch, or pool deck. And tropical hibiscus are an evergreen in many parts of the country, so they will stay green all winter long, so they can be brought in the house. They will require a south-facing window or somewhere with very bright sunlight for the winter months if you want them to do well. They will bloom all summer long. The neat thing about tropical hibiscus is there is just about every color imaginable available. This is, as I mentioned, a variety called Aaron Rachel, which I really like a lot. It has this beautiful kind of orangey outer petal with this bright pink center, giving it a very tropical sort of two-tone or almost ombre type effect, which is just it's a really pretty flower. This is a very good reblooming variety. There's obviously only one flower on here right now. There's a couple of flowers that were spent that I just picked off. But if I tip the plant forward and just kind of show you, even on this small, this is just a little like 8 or 9 inch pot, 2 gallon, I believe. But there's flower bud, flower bud, flower bud, flower bud, flower bud, flower bud. So this is about to explode. The hibiscus love the summer. They love the heat. I will feed mine Jack's Petunia feed. They like that, the micronutrients that are in there, the slightly more acidic formulation. So I'll feed them throughout just the summer months. I will feed them Jack's Petunia feed about once every 7 to 10 or maybe even 14 days. That keeps the foliage really good and dark green and keeps them reblooming all throughout the summer months. They will need to be brought in before a very hard frost. They are quite cold tolerant, so you can leave them out pretty late into the fall, but you're definitely going to want to bring them in before we get a hard frost. I like to bring mine in when it starts to get to around 40 degrees for overnight lows, because it's going to stress the plant out. If we're getting consistent, 2, 3, 4, 5 nights in a row at or under 40, they're not going to love that. It's going to stress it out. So I like to move it in the house right before that those temperatures get here. Don't be surprised if you bring these in the house for the winter. If they drop quite a bit of foliage, they will defoliate a fair amount, sometimes up to 70, 80, maybe even 90%, and just keep a few leaves out at the tips. That's fairly common for us here in the wintertime. We don't have a lot of bright sunlight, and they're indoors. It's just a tough growing environment. Do not water them all that frequently when they're in the house. And do not feed them at all during the winter months. So during the winter season, we're not giving them any fertilizer at all. And then as soon as we're able to put them back outside in the spring, we're gonna wanna start feeding right away. Or even right before you put them outside. If it's when the days are starting to get longer, like in April, you could start feeding them. And then that way, when you put it out late April, early May, they're really gonna kick into high gear, and then they'll go really strong all the way through fall. So that's about all I'm going to mention about tropical hibiscus, because that's not really what I wanted to talk about, but I wanted to mention them because they are part of the hibiscus family and probably what we think of more often when we talk about hibiscus. The other hibiscus that we have around here, which is fairly common, are the Rose of Sharon hibiscus. So the Rose of Sharon is a shrub. It is deciduous. It will lose its leaves here in the wintertime. They are winter hardy here. They like full to part sun. And there are quite a few different varieties. I brought up just 2 today. I've got on my left, probably can't even see me through here. So on my left, I've got Azuri Blue Satin, which is a single petaled variety. 1 layer of petals, has this really pretty blue color to it. And this is a sterile variety, so it will have no seed pods, or it will have no seeds rather, and you will not end up with little baby Rose of Sharon growing all around or underneath it. This particular variety is going to get around 8 to 10 feet tall in our area. One thing I always like to point out with Rose of Sharon is I remind people that they are a little later to wake up than most shrubs. And oftentimes, especially the first season or two, you may have the upper portions of the plant actually die during the wintertime. So these stems actually die back, but you've got a little bit of life down here at the bottom. And a lot of times what we'll have to do the first season, even if I have a 2, 3, 4 foot tall plant by the end of the first growing season, after the first winter and it starts to wake up, sometimes there's only life down at the lower foot or so of the plant. Don't be alarmed if that happens. As long as the plant has rooted itself in well, you can cut back to wherever you see green, healthy growth. And as soon as the warmth kicks in, again, these like consistent warmth. So as soon as that consistent warmth kicks in, they will shoot up with new growth. So it's not uncommon the first year for a hibiscus Rose of Sharon like this to die back to 1 foot and then get trimmed back and return back to 3 or 4 feet in a matter of 4 to 6 weeks or something like that. So I really like Azuri Blue Satin a lot. I also brought up this other variety called Perennial Pink Ink. It's kind of a mouthful, but really neat, very tropical look to it. White flower with a neat pinky red center with those really cool red veins. The flowers are pretty good size. I'll just kind of put my hand over here for perspective, but pretty good size flower on that. Not as big as what I'm going to show you in a moment on the dinner plate hibiscus or perennial hibiscus, but nice sized flower, very tropical look. Also very heavy blooming. I just again want to kind of point out the flower buds. These just started to bloom. All of these up here have yet to open. These are just starting to open. But then back in here, we've got the next round of flower buds. So as soon as these bigger ones open, flower, and then drop off, then these smaller ones that are inside here are going to bloom. And almost every stem that I find has the same thing. So very heavy blooming variety. Also really nice tight shrub. I like the Perennial series. There's a few different colors available in that. Another thing that I like to point out about the Rose of Sharon is that they will bloom pretty well from typically 4th of July is when they start blooming here, maybe a little bit later, middle of July, and then they'll bloom pretty well into the early fall. So it's not uncommon to see these still blooming at mid-September even. So most of July, all of August, and oftentimes well into September. Again, a variety of different sizes. We've got some dwarfs like the Little Kim series, which are only going to be 3 to 4 feet high. We've got some standard varieties that are going to get 6, 8, 10, 12 feet high. We also have them in a single stem form or more of like a tree type form, which make a nice little patio tree or accent tree off the corner of the house or the corner of the deck. So that would be kind of more one by itself, where the shrub form could be used as a privacy screen, a low hedge, or just kind of a real pretty mass planting. They are not heavy bee attracting plants, so if you're using them near a pool or deck or patio and you're concerned about attracting bees, you don't have to worry about that with these. However, I always like to remind people that the bees that are attracted to flowers are rarely aggressive. The bees that are attracted to flowers have a job to do. They're pollinating. They're not aggressive type bees. Oftentimes bumblebees, honeybees, and a lot of our native pollinating bees, they've got a job to do. They cruise in, they get their pollen, they leave. It's not wasps and yellow jackets and hornets that are going to be attracted to the flowers on plants. So typically we don't really have to worry about that. Okay, so that's Rose of Sharon. The other type of hibiscus, and really the reason that I wanted to talk about them today, is the perennial hibiscus, or what we call the dinner plate hibiscus. And I'm going to start with this one right here because this is sort of the OG, if you will. This is swamp mallow. It is a native hibiscus, and you can kind of see the flowers on this photo. This is a young plant still, So it may throw a flower this year, but quite possibly not. It's just in a 1-gallon container and it's fairly young. But they have beautiful bubblegum pink flowers in late July, August, and September. But this is a native plant here in northern Illinois. As the name suggests, swamp mallow. It tends to be found near swampy areas, creek side, riverside, things like that. So it likes some moisture. It's a great pond plant if you have a koi pond, decorative pond, something like that, or an actual, normal farm pond or something along those lines. But really nice red stems, cool green leaves with kind of red veining in there, which is kind of neat. And then beautiful pink flowers in the late summer and early fall. This particular variety will get in the 4 to 6 foot range, so it's quite tall, and the flowers are going to be all up near the top side of the plant. All right, let's talk a little bit about their growth habit. I wanted to show you this stem right down here. So we'll talk about the varieties here in a moment, but we'll talk about them more as a whole category. So this is last year's stem. This over here is this year's stem. You can see it's quite large, at least as the diameter of my pointer finger. So I've got 2 stems here. They're both about that same diameter. And last year it had, looks like just one. There may have been another one over here. I can't quite tell. Looks like it might have even been 2 years old. So last year it had this one very large, almost the diameter of my thumb. The thing that I like to point out about these is that they are a true perennial plant, a herbaceous perennial, meaning they will die to the ground. They are not going to survive the winter, even though they have these big, thick stalks that most people would swear are, is a stem, like a shrub, like a dogwood or a viburnum or a lilac. This is not going to survive the winter. It doesn't matter how healthy the plant was. This stem will always die back to the ground. And so you will have these very large stems that you are going to have to cut out before next year's growth. Now, I like to wait until very late winter to trim these down, and I will tell you why. The center of these stems is often slightly hollow. And so when we cut these down, this one just shows a little bit, you can kind of see it right in there, kind of a hollow center. But one thing that I have found is that if you cut these back in November or December, which is a fairly common practice for people around here to cut their perennials down to the ground after Halloween, if you do that, that hollow center sort of acts like a straw, and it allows the cold, the deep cold temperatures during the winter to penetrate deeper down into the ground, because you've basically got this like air channel, if you will, that goes deeper into the crown of the plant, and it can cause more root damage that way. So I like to leave the stems completely intact. If you don't want to leave them completely intact, at least leave the lower 2 or 3 feet of the stem, leave that and just trim it to that height, 2 or 3 feet, and then wait until March or April to cut it all the way down. I just leave mine up all winter long, and in late March or early April, I will get my pruning shears out, or sometimes I honestly need a pruning saw, and I will cut the stems down as low to the ground as I possibly can, and then you just have to wait. The reason that I say you have to wait is that perennial hibiscus are always very, very late to come up. It is probably the #1 plant that we get people calling about in early May saying, hey, that perennial hibiscus I bought from you last year is dead. I want to get a replacement, or something along those lines. And we always tell people the same thing. It's probably not dead. Give it 2 more weeks and let us know if you're seeing any signs of life if you're not seeing any signs of life after 2 weeks. And I would bet that 98% of those people will not be calling me back, because lo and behold, middle of May, it starts to leaf out with just these tiny little buds coming out of the ground. And then within just a matter of a couple weeks, it will just shoot up. So again, very warm, consistent, warm loving, and particularly consistent warmth. That's the one thing that we typically don't have in late April and early May here. We might have a couple of warm days, but we have cool nights and we have inconsistent temperatures. So, you might have a couple of days in the 70s and then it's back down into the 40s or 50s for a couple of days, and it kind of does this. It's not until we get consistent warmth that the perennial hibiscus will really wake up. So those are my care tips. That's a little bit about the growing culture and all that good stuff. Again, full sun to partial sun. I've actually got one at home that I moved out of the way. It was planted by the previous homeowner. I moved it with the intention, I moved it to a shadier location with the intention of then moving it again, and I never did move it. And it actually has continued to come back every year in a mostly shaded location. It's not full shade, but mostly shaded location. I only get a couple of flowers on it though, where the ones that I have that are in full sun, I would presume hundreds of flowers per plant on those, where in the shade I'm only getting a couple. So let's talk about a few different varieties. You definitely are going to want to check the tags on the particular variety that you're interested in, because the heights do range quite a bit on the perennial hibiscus. Anywhere from 3 to 4 on the shorter side of things, all the way up to 5 to 6 on the taller side of things. So there are some more compact ones and there's some that are quite large. So we'll start with this one right here. This particular variety is called Cherry Chocolate. It is a variety that does not have any flowers on it just yet, but it is all budded up. There's tons of buds on each stem. So tip that stem forward. You can see all the flower buds in there. So it's going to open up quite nicely in just another day or 2 or 3, something like that. With the warm weather that we're having right now, they're really going to pop quickly. So Cherry Chocolate has a 2-tone leaf. It has some burgundy leaves and it has some green leaves. The leaves on the top of the plant tend to be a little bit more burgundy than the leaves on the bottom. And it's just a hint of burgundy. It's not a really dark burgundy leaf, where some of the other varieties are going to have more of a burgundy, a dark burgundy color. And then the flower on Cherry Chocolate is a really neat, like 2-tone, 3-tone flower, light pinky white, pink on like kind of pink stripes, and then a very dark red center. So very cool plant. This one is going to get around 4 feet tall. So it's kind of right in the middle of that range that I was mentioning before. So that's Cherry Chocolate. This one right here is a variety that's been around a long time. It is a fan favorite. It's called Copper King. So you can see from the foliage, it has this beautiful sort of burgundy red foliage. It is a rather tall variety, around 4 to 5 feet high, and it has red stems. You can kind of see, so along with the burgundy leaf, you get this really neat red stem, which is kind of a nice look. And then it will be followed, this is actually not a wonderful picture, but a very pale pinky white flower, which really stands out nicely against the dark foliage. This photo is a little bit bleached out looking. So it's a nice light pale pink with dark red foliage, really standing out nicely. This variety here, which is just starting to bloom, we can see some nice large flowers opening up over here. This is called Candy Crush. It's part of the Summerific series from Proven Winners. I do have quite a few of the Summerific series because I think they've probably done the best job in the breeding efforts of giving a lot of really unique color combinations, is what I will call them. So Candy Crush is going to be a very nice bright pink flower with a dark red center, and it has green foliage. It's going to get 4 to 4.5 feet tall and tends to have a lot more foliage than some of the other varieties. Some varieties have very long stalks with not a lot of foliage, where Candy Crush tends to be fairly well branched, so it makes a little bit nicer sort of shrub-like habit. Again, not a true shrub, but if we look up at the top here, it is a heavy blooming variety. Flower bud, flower bud, flower bud. So even on this like 3 or 4 stem plant, just doing some quick counts, there's probably 35 flower buds that have already formed, and we're only in not even mid-July yet, or maybe where I guess we could consider it mid-July. So we'll still have a lot of time to go for that one. So that's Candy Crush. I'll bring up 2 burgundy leaf varieties, and you can kind of see the difference between these two. This variety here is Holy Grail. Holy Grail, the name was chosen because this is what they had been trying to, the breeders had been trying to come up with, which is a bright red flower with a dark burgundy foliage. And they finally came up with it after many, many trials, and so they called it Holy Grail. And beautiful color combination. This one is not blooming yet, so you can kind of see the flower on there. Height-wise, this is in the 4 to 5 or 4 to 4.5 foot range, and is a very heavy blooming variety as well. So nice size, nice color combination. That's on Holy Grail. And then get this one out of the way and spin you around here. This is Edge of Night. And the one thing that I like to point out about Edge of Night that perhaps you already noticed is just how compact and bushy the plant is. So where some of these, like this one here, has really long stems with not as much foliage, which looks really nice when you have other perennials in front of it. You know, if you have earlier blooming things like coneflowers and, you know, maybe daylilies and whatnot over here where they're already in full bloom, and you're waiting for the hibiscus, this is gonna look really nice. Where this could be more of a standalone plant or more something that would be in the foreground because it is so nice and bushy. And then you can see the flower buds all throughout there, but really nice bushy habit. And it's gonna be a pink flower. I don't know what happened to the picture tag on here to show you the actual flower, but neat plant. For those of you that really, maybe you have a like a white theme going on or something like that, this is a neat variety. This is also part of the Summerific series. This is called French Vanilla. It's gonna be about 3.5 to 4 feet tall, so a little shorter than some of the previous varieties, but it's got this real neat creamy white flower with a red center. So very unique color combination. The reason they call these dinner plate hibiscus is the size of the flower. So I wanna show you the flower on here. This is a variety called Midnight Marvel. This is gonna be 4 to 5 feet high, purpley or you know, burgundy and green, sort of two-tone foliage, red stems with a really nice true red flower. But look at the flower size compared to my hand. I mean, they are, and this isn't even fully open. It's still partially cupped right now. It's not fully flattened or open, but beautiful flower. You know, basically, what's that? A good 5 to 6 inches across anyway. So that's Midnight Marvel. And then this is Lilac Crush. This happens to be one of the taller ones in the pot anyway. Size-wise, it's going to be 5 to 6 feet high. So it's also going to be one of the tallest in the garden. Definitely a big, stately background plant. This is gonna look beautiful with you know, some of the dwarf hydrangeas in front of it. It's gonna look great with something along the lines of some of your spring blooming, you know, allium or geum, you know, smaller plants out here in the front with this big towering plant in the background. But look at the flower size on this. Again, when I put my hand up there, this one's even larger than the previous one, than Midnight Marvel. And it's this beautiful pale pink with just a hint of purple. I think the name is very fitting, Lilac Crush. It definitely has a nice kind of, just a slight purpley blue hue to it. And I don't know how well it comes across in the photo, but it's a great color combination. Green stems, green leaves, but again, really large. This is gonna look great as a backdrop. You could even use this as, you know, somewhat of a privacy plant. I've got some at home that are almost as tall as me, and they're full from top to bottom. Again, you're not gonna have that privacy early on in the season, but if it's, you know, kind of a little porch or patio or somewhere where you'd like some privacy during the summer months, this might be a really nice choice. And then last but certainly not least is another summerific variety. This is called Cranberry Crush. And Cranberry Crush has a two-tone green and green leaf with a tinge of burgundy to it. It's got really neat red veining on the leaves, which I think is very attractive. It has a bright cranberry red flower. It is a kind of almost a slightly double petaled flower. So it's kind of hard to see here, but you've got this kind of inner layer of petals and then this outer layer of petals. So it's a little more kind of full flower. It's on the shorter side at 3 to 4 feet high. And then again, if we look at the bud count on it, really heavy bud count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 flower buds on this one stem right now. Again, it will get plenty more. And looks like every stem has at least that many flower buds on it. So we're just getting into the season for these. They are hot loving or heat loving plants, and they are going to thrive in, you know, the hot, dry temperatures that we're about to get. They don't like quite as much water as the native swamp mallow counterpart. Okay, so don't overwater these. They're not going to love that, but they definitely can take a bit of moisture, especially earlier on when they're just getting going. Again, don't trim them back until very late winter or early spring. Being that they're a heavy flowering variety and are pushing all of this new growth, they love to be fertilized in May, June, July. After that, you can kind of let them go on their own, but it takes a lot of energy to produce all of this top growth, all of this foliage, all of these stems. It all has to start over every year. Unlike a typical shrub, they don't have the benefit of being able to store sugars in a bud up here and then push that out, right? So they have to start over every year. So heavy nitrogen fertilizers earlier in the year, Jack's Classic or Jack's All-Purpose, Petunia feed, something along those lines early on in the spring, and then right now in the early summer when they're getting ready to bloom, and then you can just kind of let them go for the rest of the year. Water an established plant about once every 5 days or so. Certainly shouldn't need water any more frequently than that. So if you're looking to add a really nice tropical punch to your landscape, there's nothing better than hibiscus. There's a lot to choose from, whether you want a truly tropical hibiscus like that Aaron Rachel that I showed you at the beginning, or the Rose of Sharon hibiscus, which are going to come back from year to year and are going to get up to 12 feet tall and have a big shrubby habit to them, or these dinner plate perennial hibiscus. There's really a lot to choose from, and you're sure to find one that's going to fit in your garden. So I hope that you've found a little bit of inspiration for your garden today, and I hope that you get a chance to get outside. Thanks for being with me.